Thank you for turning to 10, your news leader. 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti continues right now.
Have to get someone who is transit-minded, not pleased with how they spent the money. Some of the money hasn't been spent. We just can't get a handle on it right now, and I think you need the new leadership down there.
That's Senate President Dominick Ruggerio. He was on with us last month, and he's talking about the RIPTA boss, Scott Avedisian, who's in studio with me now. Good morning, former Mayor, Warwick Mayor Scott Avedisian. You now run the buses. Boy, the bus is a tough game in Rhode Island. That's Senate President Ruggerio. You made a big enemy.
Well, I think part of the issue is we have not told the story as well as we needed to. Some of our funding was set forth through CARES Act funding and through APRA, and we made the conscious decision to parcel that out to go as far as possible. So we parceled out like how many months we could operate without having to look at any other resources. So we haven't spent all of it because we've been making sure that we're doing it on a monthly installment plan.
Okay, but let me push back a little bit. This is Rhode Island. You pick up the phone and you say, "Hello, Donnie. It's me, Scott. What's going on? Why are you so mad at me? Why do you want to force me out?" And then you tell him the story. Maybe he's not getting it fully, but it doesn't sound to me like that call was made or that he wants to even take the call from you. He's very angry with you the way you're running it.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we haven't had the discussion that we need to have.
Well, why not? It's Rhode Island.
I'm hopeful that we will do that so I can show him what we're doing.
Is there more to the story?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, he's gunning for you, figuratively.
Well,
wants you out.
Do
you want to push back on him?
I think we have a great story to tell. We are back to moving 1.1 million passengers a month, which is 13 million people a year.
Okay.
We did not lay anyone off during the pandemic, and we stayed viable in the services that we provided while trying to expand service even during a pandemic.
Okay, listen, the Senate President, he didn't push you out. But in the compromise, he's putting Peter Alviti, the DOT director, is going to run your board. He's on the board already, but he's going to chair your board now. And Peter's gunning for you, too. You know that. I'm not breaking news here.
Well, so Director Alviti's been on our board for 15 years.
Right.
And he knows the issues that RIPTA faces on chronic underfunding and chronic issues. I'm hopeful that we will be able to have some real good discussions about the future of RIPTA and where we're going, because he knows where we are, and he's been on that board for a long time and knows the issues that we face.
Right. From speaking to him, I'm not hopeful. Listen, Ruggerio wants you out. Peter's taken over the board. He says you're only serving 2% of the population right now. He told me that on the radio. You need to serve 10 or 15%. He said you're running the R line with no money. It's free, and that you have no operating budget. Let's listen to Peter Alviti, and you can push back on him if you like. He's going to be the new board chair as of Tuesday. Play it.
Only 3% of our population here in Rhode Island are bus users. Therein lies one of the problems. In a state like Rhode Island, that percentage should be up in the teens, and it isn't. And it hasn't been for decades, and there's no movement to get us there, and there's no, I think, vision to get us to that point. The entire state invests in a system that a very small percentage of the state's population uses. That creates issues in garnering the public support for funding an agency like that. It's a challenge.
Look, I'm not hopeful. Now, you know something? I don't mind doing a tough interview with you because you've been in politics. You and I know each other a long time.
Absolutely.
It's the business we've chosen. And it's a little rough out there for you right now. You got 3%, he said, is riding the bus. You need 10 or 15%. The R line is free. You're not making any money. Your operating budget, there's no money there. There's no money for your ambitious plans. It's not a rosy picture they're painting, Mayor.
No, but we have a duty to those 1.1 million people who have no other viable way to get to work, to school, to doctor's visits, to the hospitals. We have a duty to them to make sure that we can provide the best service that we can for the money that's allocated to us. So the biggest issue will be with falling gas tax revenue, and it's counterintuitive anyway, to know that our largest funding source is tied to the gas tax. If we get more people riding the bus, there's less gas being consumed, so there's less money that comes to us. And DOT has faced the same issues, so I'm really hopeful that that experience that Director Alviti has had in looking at how to deal with gas tax revenue falling at DOT, he will bring to us as well.
But why is your R line free? That's your busiest line. Why is it free? If you guys are having money trouble, why aren't you charging 50 cents or 40 cents?
So the legislature ordered it free
Right.
for 1 year.
Okay.
That will go out in September. They did not renew the funding for that. So
Did you push back and said, hey guys, we're broke over here. I need 40 cents or what? It's already being supplemented. You know, the taxpayer throws a ton of money at you.
mostly federal money, but yes.
Yeah, but it's taxpayer
Yep,
money.
sure.
It's all subsidized, and it's free.
So that was for 1 year,
Yeah.
so they could gauge what it would do for ridership. Now, what we found is, yes, ridership did increase, but other routes fell. So now that with the R line being free,
Yeah.
the R line also connects to a whole bunch of other routes. So if you had to pay on the other routes, you would just wait for the R line. So you could take that because it was free.
All right, so just nutshell this for me. All this complaining about you and the way you're running it, and it's not being run right. Ruggerio, Alvedi. By the way, Alvedi, I think, is examining the enabling legislation that created RIPTA to pull more power back. They have hiring and firing say that they haven't been exercising. This is all going to change for you as of Tuesday.
So hopefully they will look at the work that's been done, and not including the pandemic money.
Yeah.
You know, in the last 5 years since I've been there, we have garnered $68.5 million in federal discretionary grants.
Okay.
For electrification, for new buses, for low emission vehicles, Aquidneck Island electrification. I'm hopeful that they will look at that and say they are actually doing big chunks of what they need to get done.
I hate to beat a dead horse, but how is it that you're hopeful? Ruggerio has basically just telegraphed to you he's gunning for you. Alvedi's taken over the board on Tuesday. He's already looking at the enabling legislation, hiring and firing, negotiating. There's a lot going on over there. They're out for you. Why don't you push back and say you're either being a scapegoat, they're wrong, or they're right?
Well, I would say that they're wrong, but I'll tell you that my goal has been to work with this board to tell the story correctly.
And that's not being told?
Not all of it. So but we are working on it. We have lots of plans to have good discussions as to what the future is for public transit in Rhode Island.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the future. You and I had discussions, I think, on the radio, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, talking about the vision of lumbering buses going down Broadway with 3 people. Is this sustainable, or does it need to change fundamentally? Do you need jitney buses? Do you need other things? We'll talk about that right after the break. Scott Avedisian runs RIPTA, and he's still running RIPTA. In fact, he got a 2-year contract extension.
Correct.
You're going to be with us for a while. The RIPTA bus boy, Scott Avedisian, continues with us for another segment. Listen, we've gone over. We know Senate President Ruggerio is gunning for you. We know he's not happy with the way you're running it. We know Chairman Alvedi is taking over on Tuesday, and he feels pretty much the same way. We just did a whole segment on that. Let's talk about what could come positively out of your stewardship. You got a 2-year contract extension.
Correct.
So you're there. You're not leaving? You're not leaving?
No.
You want to finish that out?
Yes.
And nobody's going to push you out?
I intend to serve my full term.
All right, okay. About 4 years ago, I had a big discussion with you on the radio. It was a good discussion. We talked about buses lumbering up and down Broadway, half empty, the peak times of the day. We talked about these big buses that looked like they were buses when I was a kid in the 60s. What needs to fundamentally change here in Rhode Island?
So while I know that you talk about lumbering buses, but the R line itself, at capacity most of the time, overcrowding at some points of the day.
Now that's the R line.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is create more service like the R line. So it's high frequency, every 5 minutes, very reliable. That's what the overall transit master plan vision is, to create more of those corridors.
With big buses
Yes.
versus jitney buses,
Well,
do we need to look at smaller buses?
We do. We started buying 30-foot buses instead of 40-foot buses.
Right.
We use trolleys in some areas, depending on what works. And then the paratransit vehicles are 16 passengers.
Right. Electrification.
Yes.
That's also on your agenda. It's not like you're overlooking that.
No. So we have right now, our first pilot was fully funded through Volkswagen settlement money, 3 Proterra buses to get an idea of range and how we would use them. If you were to go to the Broad Street, Cranston, Providence City line, you will see under construction right now, ready to be on board by the end of the year, the state's first inline charging station, so that the R line will be all electric by the beginning of next year.
Right.
Means 20% of all of our passengers will be on electric vehicles at the beginning of next year.
All right, Peter Alviti said you're only carrying 3% of the population, and he said you need to be at 10 or 15. That means the people riding a bus now are people who have to ride the bus. The balance would be people who don't ride the bus. I don't ride the bus because, you know what, even if I wanted to ride the bus, I can't get from East Bay to West Bay at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
It doesn't serve me.
Right.
I can't get up here to Channel 10 from East Greenwich.
And we don't
Doesn't serve
operate
me.
24 hours a day anyway.
No. So this vision of getting more people to ride the bus, how would you do that?
Well, so our partnerships have been really focused on Discover Newport has free service in Newport that they pay for, on the whole Mansion route. So that's a big number for us.
Right.
When you add in all the cruise ships that are here all summer and all fall. So making that free brought in a lot of new passengers, but it's being paid for by a third party.
Okay.
Beach service in Newport, going from the north end of Newport out to the beach, is free, paid for by the Episcopal Diocese and the 3 Episcopal churches in Newport.
Right.
So that's where we're going to bring new ridership in, by doing strategic partnerships with different groups to say, here we go, you're going to pay for the service, we're going to provide it.
Right. Paying for the gas, running the buses, you have to have the money to do that. Is it true your operating budget is flat broke?
No.
You're not there? I mean, there's no money for operating, and your ambitious plans to spend a lot of money in the future, you don't have it?
Well, we don't have it in the bank today because we're still post-pandemic with the recovery money, making sure that we didn't spend it all early on to make sure that we can operate as long as possible.
You've mentioned that 3 times in the interview, so I want to give you enough time. This is obviously important to you. You're talking about post-pandemic money, so just take a minute and make it very clear for us. What is it you're saying? So I don't want to overlook that because you've mentioned it repeatedly.
So we received CARES Act funding that will run out in fiscal 2025.
Okay.
So unless we solve that fiscal cliff issue, we'll start running deficits
It goes away.
in 2026.
All right.
Correct.
Okay.
So we have parceled that money out to stay operational for as long as possible on a month-to-month basis to make sure that we're not going to all of a sudden be hit with a big crisis.
I understand. All right, long-term planning, there's been a move to pull the buses out of Kennedy Plaza.
Correct.
And you know, there's a very vocal group of riders. Boy, they got mad at me once for suggesting that those buses ought to be pulled out of Kennedy Plaza. They even called in a nasty threat against me for suggesting that. You can imagine that, Mayor. Are you still in favor of pulling those buses out of Kennedy Plaza and pushing them down further south? When I say that, just a few blocks south.
Right. Yes, we're still working on the Dorn Street Transit Project. We have gone out to bid on the RFP for that, and we will continue along that path. We'll always have to have some presence in Kennedy Plaza. It's because there's no other logical way to move buses on an east-west passage in the city. We're going to use it at some point. But the goal would be, we've heard from passengers for a long time that the building in Kennedy Plaza wasn't constructed in a manner in which it's good for passengers, right? There's not enough room, there's not enough restrooms, drivers don't have restrooms just for them. We need, the police substation is operational again, but moving to a new location would allow for a larger interior space for passengers, for drivers, for street supervision, for a police presence, and give us the ability to combine that with some retail on the first floor and then some affordable housing above.
Just 1 minute left. That new location is further south, a few blocks south, closer to the courthouse?
Correct.
Okay. And that would free up Kennedy Plaza to be a green, a park, which is what it should be in most cities. A beautiful spot.
Right, and that's what Mayor Smiley has taken a very methodical approach to what Kennedy Plaza can be.
Okay.
And I've seen 12 different renovations of what the plaza could look like over the 5 years that I've been there.
All right. Well, you used to be the mayor of Woolwich, so you knew what he's up against.
Absolutely.
And you're up against a lot. But thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. And maybe when you come in next time, we'll resolve some issues. But you're staying. You got 2 more years on your contract. You intend to fill that out.
Yes.
Former Mayor Scott Avedisian now runs RIPTA, the bus service in Rhode Island.